Hi, I'm going to show you how to spiral wedge and talk about why we wedge clay in ceramics. Behind me is a wedging table. This wedging table is made of plaster. Plaster is quite good for wedging because the clay doesn't stick to it and it absorbs a little bit of the moisture as you wedge. In clay studios, you will find wedging tables covered with canvas, made of plaster, but really it doesn't matter much as long as the table is quite sturdy and the clay doesn't stick to it. For wedging clay, you're going to need a few different things. You will need a wire tool of some sort, and you'll need your clay. If you can imagine, if you're first starting to wedge, trying to wedge a very large piece of clay can be difficult. So I would start with a bit of a smaller piece. This, I would imagine, is probably 4 to 5 pounds. A few of the reasons that we wedge the clay. Firstly, what often happens with clay is the outside or the outer layer becomes a little bit stiffer or harder than the middle or the inside. And we wedge because we want to mix that clay up. We want the clay to be all the same stiffness. If you're throwing and you bump into a hard spot, it does make throwing a little trickier or a little more difficult. When I begin wedging, I do use the palms of my hands. I tend to rock the clay back and then push it forward. So it's pulling back, pushing forward, and then after I push forward and I'm rocking the clay back, I do spin the clay 90 degrees. I push it forward again, rock it back, spin it 90 degrees. And what you'll see happens here is there is a kind of, as the clay is pushed forward, there is a line that's created here, or an edge. And what I do is, as I push it forward and rock it back, I spin 90 degrees and push it directly onto that line, or that edge. So it's pushed forward, it's pulled back, it's turned, and directly on that edge, I'm pushing. And this is where the spiral term comes in. As you push on that edge, the clay begins to spiral. I tend to start with a larger piece, wedge, and then cut into smaller pieces that I need, instead of cutting into smaller pieces and wedging each of those pieces individually, mostly for time's sake. Wedging at first is a little bit difficult. As you practice, though, it will become just an ingrained motion. Once I have the clay wedged, I go ahead and bump it onto the table. Basically, I just try to get it into a kind of a square shape. The reason I do this is really just so that I can cut it into uniform pieces more easily. So I'll get it into a square, and then I take my wire tool, wrap it around my fingers, and cut the clay. Once I have the clay cut, I take those pieces and make them into round pieces so that I can get them on the wheel more easily.